Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are going to be taking a look at day number 2 of the Clash of Blames, featuring the former world chess champion Vladimir Kramnik and one of the fan favorites, Jose Martinez Alcantara from Peru. Now, on day number 1, Jose had a great start. He won both the online portion and the over-the-board portion to take a commanding 7-5 lead into day 2. But with 24 games left to go, it's anyone's call what will happen, especially when a player like Kramnik, who has such class over the board and is so strong, gets more and more games to warm up. All right, so the way the day started off was Kramnik won the first game of the online portion and moves the score back to 7-6. There were 2 draws, and then with the score 8-7, we're going to jump into this game. Jose with the white pieces once again, and Kramnik with the black pieces. So the game starts out with the move e4 here. Get the move c5, knight f3, d6, and now we get the move bishop c4. Now, one thing that Jose has been doing in this match, which is fairly surprising, is he's avoiding the main line. Usually when Jose plays in events like Title Tuesday or other top-level online events, he normally goes right into the sharp theory with moves like d4 takes, knight f6, knight c3, and a6, and stuff like the knight over. But apparently Jose is very concerned by Kramnik's deep preparation. He is, after all, a former world champion, and so he goes bishop c4. We got the move knight f6, d3, knight c6, and now we have the move c3 being played. Kramnik goes e6, trying to blunt the power of the light square b in this position. We now get castles being played, and we have this move bishop to e7. Jose plays the move bishop b3, we get castles, rook to e1, and now we have the move b5 here. Now after b5, what black is trying to do is black is trying to play on the queen side. Maybe play d5, maybe go b4, but basically trying to do something in the center or on the queen side. Jose goes d4, building the big white center here with the pawns on d4 and e4. Kramnik plays bishop b7. Now we get the move knight bd2, rook c8, and Jose goes knight f1. Here, Kramnik trades the pawns on d4 and plays the move queen c7. What black is trying to do here is put massive pressure on the pawn on e4 when he scoots this knight to a5, but also he wants to line up a bunch of pressure on this open c file. Jose here plays move knight g3, and now we get to move knight to a5, and after knight to a5, Jose is already worse. Now this really shows the difference between the players and their play styles. Kramnik is a player who's always had great preparation from the get-go. Jose is a very strong player, don't get me wrong, but he's not someone who has the refined opening preparation. He's someone who's much more of an online player, much more of a blitz player, and so it's not really all that surprising that Kramnik is once again simply getting a better position out of the opening. Jose plays the move bishop d2. We get knight to c4. Now we have the move queen to e2, trying to guard this pawn on e4 with the queen, the knight, and the rook. Here, Kramnik plays d5. We get e5. And now after knight to e4, look at these knights on c4 and e4. They're super active pieces here, and black is doing very well. Now, Jose probably feeling the pressure, plays this move bishop to c1. Computer actually likes bishop f4 a little bit more, but he wants to retreat the bishop to guard the juicer on b2. Kramnik plays a5, another great move, taking more space on the queen side, trying to harass the bishop with a4, and white simply is lacking development because the bishop on c1 and the rook on a1 are simply not in the game. And to use one of the great phrases from the PogChamps days, one of the things you want to do is develop your pieces, or as the famous grandmaster Niels Grandelius said at the time, you want to bring the boys to the party. Now in this case, the rook on a1 and the bishop on c1, the boys are not coming to the party. In fact, they're sitting at home on a Friday night doing absolutely nothing. So we get the move knight takes e4 from Jose, pawn takes knight, and now we have knight g5, and here Kramnik plays the move a4. After a4, we get the move bishop to d1, and now the move queen b6 is played. Now at this point, Jose is just getting outplayed here. He has 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces on the original rank. White has no activity. You've got a juicer on c4, rook on an open lane, weak pawns in the center, and you also have the scopes that are open for the black bees. So Jose already just simply in a lot of trouble. He plays the move queen to h5, trying to hope that Kramnik will blunder a famous checkmate on h7. Those of you guys who were around in the early 2000s, you probably remember there was a famous match. I believe it was between Kramnik and Hydra, or maybe it was Kramnik and Deep Fritz, where Kramnik actually blundered a mate in one. Now, it was very embarrassing as a world champion at the time that he blundered the mate in one, but he did actually blunder this checkmate. So Jose is hoping that Kramnik will have some flashbacks and miss the mate in one. Unfortunately for Jose, Kramnik does not miss it. He plays move h6, stopping the mate, but also now hitting the horse on g5. We get knight takes pawn, and now Jose goes queen g4, and after queen takes e5, Jose is simply lost. He is down a pawn in the center of the board. There's an unfortunate pin, and there's also fork with f5 that exists in the position. Jose already can resign, and we're only 23 moves into the game. So Jose plays the move bishop to f4. Kramnik grabs the juicer on b2, attacking the rook in the corner. We get bishop f3, and now bishop takes knight is played. Now this is not the only move to win the game, but it's probably the cleanest, because here white cannot take with the rook, because then you get ice skated after queen takes a1 and the king has no squares. And when you play bishop takes bishop, now there's f5, and the classic pawn here forks the bishop and the queen at the same time. So Jose goes queen g6, and now Kramnik plays this great move, queen to f6. Now this is showing incredible class to play this move. It is not the only winning move, but it ends the game with literally zero drama, because now the bishop is under attack, but white has to do something with the queen. You move the queen away, I take the bishop and win the game. And when you trade the queens, now I take with the bishop, and your bishop on e4 and your rook on a1 are both under attack. We're also in an end game. No queens on the board. Remember, yesterday Kramnik lost a game where he had 2 queens versus 1. So no queens on the board. There will be no problems for black. So we get bishop b7. Bishop takes rook is played. We got bishop takes rook, and Kramnik simply takes the bishop on c8. And here Jose resigns the game rather than trying to keep it going. He is down a bunch of juicers here. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. White has 1, 2, 3, 4. Black is simply up 2 pawns here, and it's going to be GG on the spot. So Jose resigns this game rather than keeping it going. This meant that the match was all tied up after 16 games. Now the match would remain this way as we head into the final game of the day, game number 24. Basically, there were a lot of draws, a lot of choppy end games, time scrambles, and everything. But we're now going to jump to the final game of the day with the score tied at 11.5 each. So Jose with the white pieces once again in the final game of the day, and we now get to move e4. Here we have c5, knight f3, d6, and Jose decides to play c3. Now there's one thing I want to say about this match. It's very odd because for Jose, he has not played the main lines, but having avoided all the main lines, it now could actually be very potentially dangerous to play the main lines tomorrow against Kramnik, who's very well prepared, because Jose will then be going into the main lines where he could actually get into a lot of trouble. So now it might shift the other way where he wants to continue playing sidelines. We get knight f6, bishop e2, g6, castles, bishop g7. Of course, knight takes e4. Looks like a free juicer, but as I mentioned in yesterday's video, after queen to a4 here, we have the classic 90-degree right triangle from the classic math school, where the queen hits the king with check, but whenever you block with the bishop or the knight, doesn't matter which piece, I take the horse on e4, and this is what is known as the 90-degree right triangle trick in the game of chess. So we get bishop g7 instead. We now have d3 here guarding the pawn, castles, bishop to e3, and here Kramnik plays knight c6. Now, Kramnik actually was playing b6 on the first day, trying to fianchetto the bishop and pressure this pawn on e4. Today he goes knight c6, we get knight bd2, now we have the move e5. Black is trying to stop white from building this nice big white center with d4. Here Jose plays h3 once again to stop this knight g4 idea, which would harass the bishop on e3, and now we get the move knight to e8. Now we have knight c4, and Kramnik goes b5, knight a3, and we have the move rook to b8. Here what Kramnik is trying to do is he's trying to play for f5, d5, or b4. He has all these great pushes to create chaos in the center of the board or on the queen side, and it's looking kind of unpleasant for Jose. Now, this is not really that surprising because Jose has struggled a lot in the openings. He's been worse every game, it seems like, with the white pieces. So we get knight c2, b4. Jose plays the move d4, trying to build this big white center. We get pawn takes, pawn takes, pawn takes, pawn takes, and now we have the move knight to f6. Now what Kramnik is trying to do here is he's trying to put a lot of pressure on this big white center with these pawns on e4 and d4. Jose goes knight to d2. Now he has the bishop and a knight guarding this one, but the knight on d2 guards the pawn. So these knights guard the big white center as best they can. Kramnik goes rook e8. We got the move d takes c5, and now we have the move d5. Now this is the move that Kramnik played, trying to create even more complications in this game. He's hoping for takes, where now suddenly the knight is jumping, the bishop is open, you've got the rook on the e file, the rook on the open b file, and black is actually much better. But Jose plays the move bishop to f4. We get rook b2, and now we have the move rook c1 being played. Now the computer will tell you that bishop to d6 is the best move here, as you create a wooden shield. Bishop guards the pawn on c5, and it covers all the diagonals, but rook c1 is very logical too. You sidestep any threats on the diagonal, and you also guard the horse on c2. Kramnik takes the pawn on a2. We get bishop d6 now, and we have the move knight takes e4. Jose trades the horses, and here he plays this move bishop to b5. Now this is simply a bad move. What Jose should have played here was this move bishop to c4, hitting the rook, and after rook to b2, there's bishop takes pawn, king takes, and queen to d5, checking the king, and after black blocks, you take the horse on c6, and white is much better due to the weakened black king, the potential pass pawn here on the c file, and after say queen a8 and queen to a4 here, You're going to push c6. The pawn on e4 and the pawn on a7 are both weak at the same time. And of course, we have another 90-degree right triangle. So Jose instead plays bishop b5. Very logical if you don't see what black can do here, because after bishop d7, Jose no doubt thought he could trade and go knight b4, forking the rook and the bishop at the same time. Looks very good. Unfortunately, black has this nasty resource, bishop a4, where you hit the queen, so you can't take the rook because then you lose your queen and the game. Jose now plays queen g4, and this is the start of going in a very wrong direction. What Jose should have played here was the move queen to d5, and after rook b2, white can either play the move c6 or the move rook to b1, and it's very complicated. I personally would go c6 here, trying to push p with the rook behind the pawn. So we get queen g4 instead. Kramnik now goes rook to d2. We get the move queen to f4 and the move rook d4. Jose goes knight c2, doesn't want to hang the knight on the b4 square. We got chop chop, e3, queen to f3, and now Kramnik with 30 seconds on the clock spends a lot of time before making a mistake with pawn takes pawn. What Kramnik should have played here was this move rook to d2, creating the kebab on the second rank here. And if white trades the rooks, now you have a passed pawn, one square from queening, and after queen d3 and bishop h6 here, black is threatening to go rook to e1, d1 queen, and white is in all kinds of trouble. Instead, Kramnik trades on f2. We get the move f5, and you'll notice here that black is up one pawn. Black has 4 pawns here, white has 3 pawns. So black has 1 extra pawn, but white has a nice wooden shield here, which restricts a lot of the piece activity, and you can potentially try to push p with c6, c7 down the road. So Jose goes rook e2, we get rook e4, takes, and now we have this move queen b3. Now this is simply a mistake. What Jose should have played here was queen to f7 check, king to h8, and now you have the very nasty move rook to b1, lining up the double stack on the 7th rank. And here, as you can tell from the eval bar, black is simply lost. If you go e3, for example, I think you have both rook b7 or rook b8. This is also a secondary idea, which is quite good to hit the queen and the rook. But even rook to b7 here, I think is also very good, because after rook g8 and rook to e7, now the e pawn is stuck. You have all kinds of threats towards the black king in the corner. You can even start considering pushing the c pawn. So instead, Jose plays the move queen b3. We get king to h8, and now we have queen e3. And after queen to d7, now white's c pawn is not going up the board. It's going to be blockaded. Black has wide peepos here. You've got a rook behind the passed e pawn. You can start pushing p with a5, a4, a3, trying to get the pawn to the end of the board. So the wide peepos here, black should be much better. On the other hand, Kramnik is very low on time, so anything can happen. We get king h1, h6, rook d1, a5, rook d2, and now we get the move queen c6. Jose goes queen g3, we get king h7, and now we have the move rook f2. Now, Jose is trying desperately to create a bunch of he's trying to create some complications here. He's trying very hard to do anything to keep the game going. He's obviously technically lost, but he's hoping that Kramnik will see the boogeyman like he did yesterday at the end, where these ideas like rook f7 start to become very, very dangerous, and you start worrying a lot about the position. So here Kramnik goes to e3, we get rook to e2, and now we have the move queen to e4. Jose plays bishop f4, and we get this move a4, which is simply a mistake from Kramnik. Now, Kramnik, of course, he's a little bit slower. He's not super young, but in this position, there are multiple ways to win. The computer line with rook f8, I think if you have a minute or 2 minutes, you probably can find it, because after takes, rook f1, if you block, you sack your rook, and if you go king h2, there is bishop to e5, winning the game immediately. This one is not so obvious a spot with limited time, but the one that I would expect Kramnik to find is the move bishop to d4, hitting the pawn on c5, but also guarding this pawn on e3 from being captured. And here, after say queen h4 and h5, black is simply going to start pushing this a pawn down the board and should be winning. Kramnik instead plays the move a4 and simply blunders the pawn on e3. Now at this point, Jose has come all the way back, so he's not going to be losing the match going into day number 3. It will look like maybe he can get some miracle, but the show goes on. We get queen b1, king to h2, and now we have the move rook takes e3 being played. Now, Kramnik could have played this very sneaky move, bishop d4, trying to sack the rook, because if rook takes rook, there is simply queen g1 checkmate, and it's uh-oh spaghetti-o time. Instead, Kramnik trades, and now he goes queen c2. Here at this point, it should be a draw. Most likely, these two pawns should offset. We have bishop to e5 being played. Kramnik trades, and now he plays this move a3. Now this move is simply a huge mistake, all things considered. Kramnik probably thought after a3 the game was going to end with some kind of repetition like this, but unfortunately for him, after a3 is played here, white can go queen c7, king g8, queen b8, king f7, and now after queen a7 check, you hit the king, but you're going to win this pawn on a3, and it's going to be a long struggle. We get king e6, takes, king d5, and now Jose correctly plays the move queen a8, checking the king. The pawn here is poisoned because if you take the pawn, there's queen c8 and you lose your queen on c2. Kramnik goes king c4, we get queen a6, king b4, check, king c4, and now Jose plays a couple of moves before finally playing the move pawn to c6. Here we get the move queen to f5, and now Jose makes a big mistake with this move queen to e3. At this point, if Jose had played the move c7, he would be winning here, because if black tries to check on e5, after king h1, queen e1, you can block with the queen, and after queen to e8, you can simply promote, and then go queen c1 check, winning the queen on c8. If black plays the move queen to f4, which is another option, again you have king to h1, and regardless of which check black goes for, it doesn't really matter. You still can blockade with the queen on g1, and because of this pass pawn on c7, the game is over. Instead, Jose plays queen e3. Now Kramnik correctly finds the move king b5, c7, king c6, and because the queen covers the square, now white is struggling to keep this pass pawn alive. Jose goes check, we get king b7, now we get queen c4. We get a bunch of dilly-dallying here, a lot of random moves get played here, before finally we get to this critical moment with queen takes h4. Now here, both players are moving with seconds on the clock, but it's clear that Kramnik has survived the worst, and he should draw the game. We get queen to e5, now we have queen c4 here, Jose goes queen f6, we get queen c7, queen g6, and now both sides have a queen and a pawn. If Kramnik plays queen e5, he goes queen c5, pretty much any queen move to guard the pawn, he will not lose this game. Instead, Kramnik plays the move queen to b6, and this move loses immediately. Now, I think Kramnik probably just assumed that this was a draw on king and pawn endgame, and he wasn't counting the moves, but this is a horrible decision, because any other move, queen c1, queen e5, I think actually literally any other move that doesn't hang the queen. I think the only moves that lose here are queen g3, queen h2. You've got 1 2 3 to hang the queen to do the Botez gambit. There are 5 Botez gambits here with queen g3, queen h2, queen f7, h7, but other than the 6 Botez gambits with queen d6 as well, black has no other way of losing. Unless you play one of these moves that hangs the queen or you check, it is a draw. You can even play queen c3 and it's a draw. Literally any move except queen b6 is a draw, but he plays queen b6, and now after the trade, unfortunately for Kramnik, he loses the race by 1 move. King h2, king c5, king h3, king d4, king h4, king e5, takes king f4, and now after the move g4, Kramnik resigns the game because white's pawn is going up the board. It is going to promote to a queen, and white will win the game. After king e5, g5, here, white gets the queen. It's GG, why not? So with this win, this crazy win in the final game of the second day, Jose goes into the third and final day of the match with a 1-point lead. Now, there are a couple of observations or conclusions that I reached so far, which is that it's very clear that Jose is he's simply not as well prepared in the openings. Kramnik is one of the greatest theoreticians on top of being one of the greatest players of all time, and Jose is struggling mightily. Now, if Jose gets out of the opening phase without being much worse, he generally does very well, but it's been a very tough struggle for him as Kramnik seems to be extremely well prepared in this match. Additionally, it's also very clear that Kramnik, even if he is a little bit older and definitely a little bit paranoid about quite a few topics, he is still a very formidable player. You don't simply forget how to play chess overnight, and even if he were to be 60 or 70, he'll still will have a certain level of class, even if he's not studying chess consistently. That being said, Jose is holding his own. He is currently up by 1 point. It's 12.5, 11.5 as they go into the final day number 3, where there will be 12 more games. Should be pretty exciting. I will obviously be recapping that, but I do hope you guys have enjoyed this recap from day number 2 of the Clash of Blames featuring Vladimir Kramnik and Jose Martinez Alcantara. If you are not already subscribed to the video, make sure, or if you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and we'll be back soon with some more great recaps from either my games, the Clash of Blames, and everything else that's going on. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. See you. Bye.